Hello, my name is Jerry Wise, and I am a relationship expert, a self-expert, a marriage and family therapy expert, and I'm the founder and director of Jerry Wise Relationship Systems. And today's video is entitled From Self-Blame to Self-Acceptance. A lot of people have mentioned to me about the difficulties they have with self-blame and how that's a chronic, very common problem that people experience often, and it's a very painful, toxic experience when our internal emotional life is accepting too much blame for problems around us, for people's feelings, for people's difficulties, for conflicts, and all kinds of other behaviors. Adult children of alcoholics, adult children of narcissists, and generally adult children of dysfunctional families all suffer with this similar experience of the problem of self-blame. Now, if you get nothing else from this video today, I hope you will get that self-blame has an antidote, and that antidote is self-acceptance. Not easy, but certainly an important work that we have to do to accept ourselves. So what is self-blame? Self-blame is a learned response in which adult children reverse to a childlike state and feel over-responsible for problems or conflicts. Excuse me. Michael Formica on the Enlightened Living website mentions, and he states, self-blame is one of the most toxic forms of emotional abuse. It amplifies our perceived inadequacies, whether real or imagined, and paralyzes us before we can even begin to move. And as you've heard from me so often, blame, as I've said in many of my videos, is an emotional mental state that deflects from the real source of the problem, or the real focus, or the real issue that is responsible for the problem. And this misassigned responsibility is a way to take the focus away from who really should be responsible for these problems. When we misassign responsibility and blame ourselves and over-blame ourselves, take over responsibility, it comes out of our naivety and our blindness to the responsibilities that others have, or others who should be taking responsibility for these problems. For example, a child is blamed for upsetting dad, who's an alcoholic, and why he's drinking. A child is blamed for not being perfect, for wasting water, for not eating all their food, for being ungrateful, for upsetting their sibling, for not doing enough, for causing dad and mom to argue, for speaking the truth, for causing the negative feelings in others, such as anxiety, hurt, anger, shame, guilt. And that person or adult will cause the child and will want the child to take responsibility for problems that they have not resolved or should take responsibility for. This is a critical point in this video today. Children learn this self-blame to preserve a belief in parental integrity or in the integrity of another. We must ascribe or we must ascribe positive motives for them and positive motives for our parents or whomever we are taking too much self-blame for. We must keep those positive integrity, and so we will blame ourselves so as to not injure that integrity of the other. In other words, for example, a child grows up in a very dysfunctional, abusive family that's very conflictual or alcoholic or narcissistic, And they must maintain the integrity of these types of beliefs. My parents really do love me. Or in an alcoholic marriage, I know my alcoholic husband really loves me, even though he does all these bad things. My parents are right. Parents must know, or others must know, what's best or right for me. Parents just want me to learn better. Parents are protecting me. Well, because there's this incongruence, meaning you have the alcoholic spouse who's doing all kinds of damage to the family and to the marriage, etc., and we go, but I know he loves me, so I wonder how I should be the blame for this. Because I don't want to look at the fact that maybe he's just not able to love you in a healthy way. Maybe your parents weren't loving you as narcissists. Assumption, because there's this incongruence, then denial sets in. And then we don't want to look at their real traits and look at them in a reasonable, rational way. Assumption of all the responsibility protects the parents and parental integrity when we're growing up. As long as I take all the blame, then mom and dad are still good. And I need them to be good, because if I didn't think they were good, I'd really be having difficulties, fears, anxieties, etc. Now, here's the thought process that goes into self-blame when we're growing up as children. There's nothing wrong with my parents. They are good and loving, no matter what they do. That's the parental integrity that I have to keep in place. But there is something wrong here, because I'm getting beaten, I'm getting criticized, I'm getting shamed, etc. Then perfectionism and conditional behavior acceptance kicks in. And then we go, if I change myself, I can fix the wrong, so I have some control over what's going on. And if I blame myself, I don't have to blame them and have conflict with them. And the inconsistency is fixed, and I can be loved and cared for if I take the blame. So if I take the blame, fix myself, then my parents will love me and continue to care about me, even though they're acting as though they don't. But we can't see that as children. We have to maintain that parental integrity. Self-blame is a part of the adult child's sense of unhealthy omnipotence or all-powerfulness and negative grandiosity, that it must just be my fault. So I'll take all this negativity. And what does that do for us? It wards off helplessness and fear. Then I don't have to deal with the helplessness and fear. I just take the blame, try to fix myself, and things get better. Self-blame results in a way to bind uncomfortable feelings of loss of control and anxiety. If I take the blame, it helps with that loss of control and anxiety that I don't want to experience. Self-blame is also a result of all or nothing thinking. Someone has to be totally right, someone has to be totally wrong. And that all or nothing thinking comes from very dysfunctional families. And then we have self-blame. Well, if they have to be totally right, if someone has to be totally wrong, then I guess it will be me. Because I can at least control that to some degree. So what do we do to recover from self-blame? First of all, we become aware self-blame has a lot of power when it happens automatically. So by becoming aware of our self-blame spiral and our self-blame pattern, we can realize we are doing it and begin to gain some control over it. Secondly, determine the content of the self-blame. Where is the misassigned responsibility? So I have to look at how am I misassigning this responsibility to myself when there should be more responsibility across the board, or maybe I'm not responsible at all, but I've taken on this responsibility. Look for the roots of the problem in our childhood. How and where did we learn to self-blame? Where did we need to keep integrity of the other person intact? And so many people, like let's say wives who've married alcoholics, they grew up in families where they had to keep their parents' integrity intact. Now they've married someone that they have to keep their spouse's integrity intact. And the way to do that is through self-blame. It must be my fault. Go back and relive your childhood and heal the messages and assign the proper responsibility. For example, I was not responsible for my dad's drinking or my parents fighting or their divorce or the abuse that they heaped on me. I was not responsible for that. I was the child, they were the adult. They thought I should be the adult and they should act like children. And somehow I wanted to keep that parental love integrity in place, so I took the blame. Self-acceptance. Take a self-care approach to self-blame. Do some work accepting your weaknesses, imperfections, and mistakes. Acknowledge your humanness, and that's very difficult for adult children to do. There's a very strong perfectionism dynamic that goes on, and they very much need to be perfect or always do it right. And if they do a little bit wrong, then they take 110 responsibility for doing their part of doing it wrong. They take 110% when really they might be 10% responsible for what's going on or the problem. Work on your self-differentiation from your family of origin. Self-blame is a form of enmeshment, as I've said many times in the videos that I've done, and too much emotional togetherness with your family of origin will continue on into adulthood and on into your adult relationships. So if we can break free of enmeshment in our family of origin, we can break free in our enmeshment in our adult relationships. And that's a family systems principle. Write down the ways you are responsible in this instance or for this problem. Write down how you are responsible and write down the ways you are not responsible or that others are responsible in this instance. Get a clarity of where does that responsibility lie. And don't stay in the naivety or the denial that it's all me. No. Write it down, see it, feel it, read it, that, wait a minute, I am responsible for these 2 things. They are responsible for these 10 things or the cause of us being here in the first place. And again, just like in an alcoholic home, dad drinks too much, spends too much money, they don't have enough money, they have trouble paying the water bill, then the child has the water on in the bathroom, and guess what happens? Why are you wasting all that water? Oh, and then the child goes, must be all my fault for wasting water. No, the responsibility falls on dad and mom who are not taking their finances responsibly. Dad's drinking he's not dealing with. And so now it falls down to the child who's just got the water on in the bathroom. And guess who gets the blame for all those problems? The child. Also, and this is not an easy thing to do, write down the downsides if you gave up the pattern and spiral of self-blame. What conflicts would that cause? If I stopped blaming myself for everything and stopped self-blaming, what conflict would that cause? Certainly in the case of the alcoholic husband and wife, then the wife, let's say, could be just as easy the husband, but the wife is not the drinker, the husband is, and she decides, wait a minute, it's not my fault. And that's why we go to Al-Anon and 12-step groups. It's not my fault that he's drinking and being irresponsible. I'm not going to take the blame for all the problems we have that are related to his drinking. Well, what would be the downside of giving that up and giving up that thought process? The downside would be now we have much more conflict between husband and wife. And the pressure is put on the addict or alcoholic that the problem lies there, not with the wife, which keeps a nice status quo and peacemaking happening. So there may be some real reasons why I want to keep self-blaming, because I don't want to deal with the anxiety, the feelings of loss of control, the conflict that's going to happen if I don't take the self-blame. So we want to deal with those downsides so that we can be stronger in resisting self-blame. And I would recommend getting a coach, a therapist, or someone to help you with those downsides. That might take a little more work from someone who's guiding you. Maybe even a sponsor could be of help to you in your 12-step recovery group. I hope that you will contact me if you'd like to work with me and deal with self-blame or other issues. Again, I work on self-differentiation and help people to grow and becoming their true authentic selves. I hope you'll go to my website, www.jerrywiserelationshipsystems.com. You can join the mailing list. I hope you'll join this YouTube channel of the same name. And then I have the Facebook Facebook page, which also is the same name. Excuse me, and I put up videos and quotes on the Facebook page. So you can join our community of family systems folks who are interested in healing a new and different way. I do want to thank you for listening today, and I hope you have a great day.